We have testnet 4. Testnet 4, for those who don't know about like testnets, it's like test networks that are replicating the Bitcoin network itself and how it works, but the coins there do not have any value, and they are intended for testnet purposes, hence the name testnet. So it's a test network for testing purposes for like researchers, developers, and also curious people who want to just do some transactions and learn a little bit more about how Bitcoin works. So why is it called testnet 4? Because this is the fourth iteration of testnet, at least the fourth iteration of testnet we're using right now. Because there was like other testnets before, and they were shut down because in some of the cases the coins for testnets started being traded, and they gained like popularity, and then people decided, so let's just kill this network and let's not make it like something that would gain economic value, because that's not a good place to do testing on. So I think that happened for testnet 2, probably, I'm not sure, or maybe the first testnet. Then there was testnet 3, which we were using for a really long time. But then there were a lot of problems in testnet 3, including spam, including all sorts of parameter changes, like somebody just connects a full-fledged miner to the network and just starts mining all the blocks for the difficulty difficulty epoch in a few minutes, and then just makes the whole network stuck and just raises the difficulty, and then just disconnects. And there were people messing around with the testnet because it's not worth it to protect it, so nobody's mining there. So there's very few hash power there. So that made it very difficult for developers who relied on testnet for testing purposes to actually be able to use it. So that was like kind of difficult to start using it. So I do remember such things happen. Actually, there were times that somebody just connected a miner there and it just made the difficulty so high, and then they disconnected the miner, and then no new blocks were being generated because the difficulty is now much higher than what it was, and much higher than the hash rate provided by the users on the testnet network. So it was like stuck for days, or probably you couldn't like do the testing that you needed on testnet 3. And there were all sorts of other stuff happening on there. There were spam, uh there were like, I think, attacks on it. So because like it's a testing ground, nobody cares about it, so nobody protects it, so there would be a lot of attacks on it. So one thing that some of the developers thought of was the launch of something called Signet, which Signet now kind of doesn't require mining, but requires signatures from developers. So it's like some kind of probably we could call it some kind of a proof of stake network. But instead of like hash power, we rely on a few people that we trust and are developers to run this network for other developers to be able to just start using it. And it's been like probably one of the best ones up to this moment. Like I know that this is like a controlled environment. It works fine. It's all good because it requires only few people who don't have any motive to just mess around with the Signet. So that's also cool, but there wasn't some motivation actually for launching a new testnet, which was like testnet 4. And I think it launched a year ago. And now what this topic is about is that people are stuck with developing or how to develop testnet 4. So at first they wanted to have a controlled environment, but at the same time, something that is also both controlled. So it's balancing the characteristics of a permissionless network, because you need it to look like Bitcoin. You need it to act like Bitcoin, because like that's the problem with Signet, because it's not completely like Bitcoin. So it's not the best test environment. So you want it to act like Bitcoin, to have all the characteristics of a permissionless network, but at the same time, you need to be able to control it. Because if you don't control the testing environment, it just gets messy and it's not possible to test whatever you want to test on the network. That's what they call it. It's the dichotomy. This dichotomy had led to testnet for not fulfilling its intended objective, as it is neither accurately simulates the operational conditions of the Bitcoin mainnet, nor effectively provides developers with an easy platform for mining blocks on personal devices. So it's like it's stuck between these two. It wants to be a permissionless network, but it also wants to have some control, so it won't be messed up. So it's rather confusing, and they're discussing how to develop it so it would make sense, or actually how to make it like change it in a way that would make sense to have like the best testing environment. And that's actually a really cool and interesting topic that I think it's fascinating to have like a place on to think about these kind of stuff.
About testnet in general, I have some questions. It was several years ago when Samurai was still around, and I was too afraid to use some real coins to practice mixing. So I used some testnet coins, and it wasn't working first because it was testnet. And I remember I asked on your group, and you said that, yeah, it's not working. You're not getting any traction because it's on testnet. Though it worked eventually, as you said, it took some time for it to work. Uh, is testnet 4 exactly like Bitcoin? And can we? I know with respect to mining, it has different rules. But if you want to do Lightning experiments, does it matter which testnet you choose?
Well, it does kind of matter because, like, if you want to use like Signet, that's not completely the same thing, and it does also matter from an adaptability perspective because, like, you may want to test stuff on, like, let's say this software, and that software only supports testnet 3 for testing, and then another software may only support testnet 4, another one may support only Signet. So these are not cross compatible with each other, right? So if a user just wants to test a few stuff, like just like you, a user who was curious to learn a little bit more about like the processes and everything, they may have like testnet 3 coins, but they may not work on Signet or testnet 4 or others. And then there's not much traction on testnets, and there's not much transactions on the testnets. So that's also a problem. Like, let's say you wanted to, I do remember that you wanted to test out Whirlpool for mixing. Or Whirlpool didn't have like enough participants in testnet because like nobody cared about like doing tests, like doing mixing, but on testnet, like why would people want to do that? Like there would be probably very few people who want to just learn a few stuff, but there won't be like serious demand. So there won't be enough liquidity to do the mixing. Then that's the problem we actually face because there's not much traction, there's not much transactions on it. So yeah, it does matter which testnet to use, and it does matter from mostly research and like real development testing purposes because like now I think in testnet 4 they remove some like difficulty and mining rules and things like that. And I think on testnet 3 we could check that actually. Testnet 3 is like much younger than the Bitcoin network itself, right? But the latest blocks for testnet 3 are 4,306,058. 4 million. Mainnet blocks are 896,000. So that's like 5-6 times more amount, like number of blocks. So you see, like there's like blocks being produced just now. Like this is not good representation. So we had probably, I don't know, 30, 40 blocks. Like there's so many blocks that were produced all at the same time. So this is not a good representation for how the Bitcoin network actually works. So it is completely different. It's completely obvious that it is different. So this doesn't end actually. Like maybe like a few hundred blocks were mined at the same time. You can see what's the problem here. Like this is not how the Bitcoin network works. So now we get to 1 minute ago, right? 732. And then if we go to the first one, how many blocks is that? It's like 300 blocks or something. So if I'm
Just
not
now.
wrong.
Mm.
Yeah, just 300 blocks in the last minute and probably 300 other blocks. And you can see 300% here increase in hash rate.
Maybe it
Average
is
block time
done
is
by
2 minutes.
yeah, it's done probably by one of those jokers who just hooks up a real miner to the
Mhm.
network to just
Yeah,
increase the
probably.
difficulty and make the life of other developers difficult.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so you can see that like how this thing is like kind of messy. Like you cannot expect real world scenarios of testing Bitcoin on this network. Like let's say if you want to test out, actually there's also a completely individual, independent kind of a testnet that you could run, which is like your own test network for yourself. That is called Regtest, which is like you're on your own node in Regtest mode, and then you connect any software you want to it, and you mine starting the actually the first blocks. So it's like you're gonna mine from the day zero on Bitcoin. So that's how it works. Like for Regtest, that's also a cool way to do some tests, but that's also not a completely similar environment to how Bitcoin actually works. It doesn't like simulate the whole Bitcoin network thing. So I could see why some people wouldn't like to test using that.